I think we can start. Mostly everybody is here. Q&A session.
กราบนมัสการพระอาจารย์เจ้าค่ะ There are three types of minds that you have mentioned earlier this morning. What if one has a mind like a stone? Can you please give us advice on how to loosen your mindset and not make it so permanent?
Yeah, you need to grind the stone down into dirt and then take the dirt and throw it in the water. A lot of it is just grinding it down through practice. And if you have that intention, so if you have a mind like stone, but you have the intention to practice, it's already going to get better. Yeah. So mind like stone is normally when somebody doesn't practice. If you practice, it's probably going to get better. You know, like I know people who's like, relatives who they did something so long ago and it wasn't even that bad, but like, then I know the people that never forgive them and they don't even remember what they did. Actually, they don't even. So like somebody maybe has like relative who do something bad in the past, maybe 30, 40 years ago, and hold on to it and never talk with that person again. It's say the person's sister or brother, they never talk with them again because of this thing they did. But now 40 years later, they can't even remember what they did, but all they know is they're still angry at them. So that's like mind like stone. Like it just, and it's very common. All of you probably raise your hand if you know somebody, raise your hand if you know somebody like this or have experienced this before. Yeah. About half. Yeah. Very common. Yeah. So it gets better through practice and through forgiveness. If you can identify the problem and say if somebody did something bad to you in the past, you can bring them up and forgive them. It's not saying that what they did is okay, but it's saying, I forgive you, and that's a gift to yourself because you can let go of that anger. And then when you forgive somebody, it also gives them allow them to change also. So this example I'm speaking of, it's actually in my own family. And as a monk, I like to try to bring people together. So I've seen different sides of the story or different family members. And, the person holding the grudge, these family members are completely different people now. They're not the same as they were 40 years ago. They're much better people. And so, we need to be able to see anicang, that people can change, people can get better. People can learn how to not do the bad thing anymore. Yeah. Even if what they did before was very bad, they can still learn. But they will learn better if we can forgive them. So that can help. Yeah. Once we forgive somebody, that helps us to let go of it. Yeah. It's like I read this book, Unbroken. It's about the prisoner of war, the American prisoner of war, Louis Zamperini in World War II. And he was a prisoner of war in Japan and was tortured by the Japanese soldiers. And actually, after the war, he got out and was saved. And he became a very strong Christian. And he had this practice of forgiveness. And he wanted to forgive the people who tortured him. And there was one guy in particular, a famous Japanese soldier who was very, very, very bad. And Louis Zamperini wanted to go to Japan and meet him in person to forgive him in person, which is quite powerful. But the other guy wouldn't agree to the meeting. Yeah. So even people who do really, really bad thing, we can still forgive them, and that will make us feel so much better. Yeah. So mind like stone is like, that's our suffering. It's not anybody else. Yeah. So you just have to keep practicing. Yeah.
กราบนมัสการพระอาจารย์ครับ I was born in a Buddhist country, but was a paper Buddhist for the majority of my life. So only in these late years in life that I'm becoming a practicing Buddhist through the steering of my Kalyanamit and sisters and brothers. So it seems to me that my life is predestined. 90% is what I have done, committed my karma in the past. And 10% is what I'm doing in this life. So the path to the deathless and the attainment of Nibbana is very bleak for me. And there seems to be no guarantee that in my next life, I'll be born again in a Buddhist country and would have the opportunity to become a practicing Buddhist. So what are your thoughts on this? And most importantly, perhaps more encouraging words for me and others who have similar thoughts.
Yeah, everybody I have this as well. And you don't have to worry. The intention and the aspiration we make for ourselves are very powerful. And you may not realize it, but you're here now because of intentions and aspirations you made in the past, and they're bearing fruit. And so if we're getting older and we want to make sure that we're always in a situation where we can practice the Dhamma, then what we can do is every time we bow, we can say just quietly to ourselves, may I always come into contact with Dhamma, or may I always be born in situation where I can continue my Dhamma practice. If you have that very strong intention, then, and if you have any doubts about how strong it is, you just make that intention every time you bow. Just come up with a short phrase that you mentally do every time you bow, and that stays with you, even beyond death. And chances are all of us have made aspirations like that in our past lives, which is why we're here now, although we can't remember that. But this is very, very, very powerful when we do that. And then as far as Nibbana, nobody can know exactly the trajectory of our path. But that's about how it is. You said 90%, 10%, 90% past karma, 10% we can kind of steer it. That's about how it is. In America, people like to ask the monks, is it predestination or free will? What does the Buddha say about that? And the Buddha doesn't say either. Actually, it's kind of a combination of the two. So if it's predestination, it's like, well, God has a plan for you, and there's nothing you can do about it. It doesn't matter. All of your intentions, you may think you have a choice, but actually you don't. It's all predestined. So it's kind of like that, because our past karma conditions our choices. The choices that we make is conditioned by our past karma. But it is kind of mysterious that there is a bit of free will in there as well, and that we have this ability to steer it in a different direction, in a better direction. But we can't just do a U-turn, or we can't just go right away, become a different person. We can't do that. But we have to steer it, and it's kind of mysterious. And even the Buddha, he didn't really talk about it so much. So, but then there is predestination as well, because like you had Sakyamuni Buddha had the prediction from Dipankara Buddha that he was going to be Buddha in the future. So that was predestined. But then how that played out, he had his own mind he had to work on all of these lifetimes. So it is It is quite mysterious how it all works. Actually, the Buddha said that only Buddhas can know about Kamma. Even the Arhat can't know. They can know about, the Arhat has the insight into Kamma, but they can't know the exact detail of how the Kamma will play out. Yeah. So for example, only a Buddha can predict the future completely accurately. If it's not Buddha, then it might not play out exactly as that monk predicted. So that's where saddha comes in. As we know we keep moving. We know we're moving in the good direction, so we just keep moving in the same direction. By lei. One aspiration that can be helpful is like every time you bow, say like, may I always come into contact with Dhamma. So that's a short enough phrase that we can do when we bow. So like we can pause before we bow and we think, may I always come into contact with Dhamma, and then bow 3 times. And if we do that every time we bow, that's very strong, plants those seeds.
You're going to hear people whispering every time they bow now.
Yeah, you could, that could inspire others to do as well.
กราบนมัสการพระอาจารย์ค่ะ My question is to seek พระอาจารย์'s wisdom is about the progress and the goal or achievement of meditation at the end of one's life. I've been fortunate to learn meditation since 30 odd years ago, and I always seek more of learning by studying more or read more or taking the retreat. And I'll make sure that I will do the retreat every year, at least once a year. Just this time that the COVID hit the world, and it has been like 3 or 4 years already. However, I realized that I haven't been progress or achieved the goal of meditation. That's my feeling. And actually, to be clear, let's clarify the goal or the achievement. Because is it to find the peace in your heart, in your mind, and aim that your very last breath in this life will be at peace and free from loha, moha, tosa, all the worries, revenge, and etc. As what we learned, then you will go to the better place in the next life if you're not going to achieve the nibbana, because it's very, very difficult and impossible, almost impossible mission. In the ภพภูมิหน้าที่ดี heaven or hell, which follows Yom Nong yesterday talked about it, and it also depends on the karma as well. But that's not very easy. Plus, there are high level of achievement on this meditation, as I learned all along. Not very keen about it. When starting from Putto, then you need to pass all the levels like Samatha Samadhi, Yanasa Samadhi, Vipassana Samadhi. And it seems to be very, very unreachable mission for a layman person and a lot of people, especially me, who walking towards the end, the destination already. So can you please give me your wisdom on this? Okay.
Yeah, sometimes the teaching is given in that way where there's all these things we need to achieve, and it does seem unbelievably difficult. That's why I really love Luang Por Cha's teaching, because like he would say things like, the practice is really difficult. Why is it difficult? Because of craving. When there's no more craving, it's not difficult. So he would say like, it's difficult because of craving. But if there's no more craving, it's not difficult, and we're happy. So we might think like, oh, Nibbana is this unbelievably high, difficult achievement, but anybody who gets to Nibbana has no difficulty, has no more difficulty. And so it's more about we keep practicing. We just keep practicing. Similar to this, Wibun's question is make those aspirations when every time we bow. You can make it based on your own, what you want. Sometimes the aspiration can be more selfless, like sometimes we think about ourselves too much, and it's like my practice. And sometimes it's better to, this is what I have some gratitude for Mahayana Buddhism, where you come out and you make your practice of, say, generosity. I mean, this is of course in Thai Buddhism as well, people being very generous. Generosity, the reason Buddha taught dana parami and generosity is so people can start to come out of themselves. When you're giving, you're not thinking about yourself, you're just happy to give. You're just happy to help somebody else. When somebody else is suffering and you talk to them and listen to them, you're not thinking about yourself in that moment. But sometimes when we meditate, we're thinking, I still have this much greed, I still have this much delusion, I still have this much anger. So we're thinking about ourselves a lot. The Buddha called that attending unwisely, because I mentioned it yesterday, who am I? How am I? What am I? What will I become? Having been what in the past, what will I become in the future? This is all, that's attending unwisely. That's attending according to the world. But how do we attend according to Dhamma? When we have a mental state, we think, this is dukkha, or this is the cause of dukkha. This is not dukkha. So when we see things in terms of dukkha, we're no longer thinking about ourselves. I'll give an example. Say we're meditating and we think, I'm such a terrible person, I have so much greed. Then we think, that thought is dukkha. So that's how we see dukkha. We think that's dukkha. That's how the heart starts to let go of those types of thoughts. And when we do that as a habit, then we start to come closer to Dhamma, and we will start to suffer less. Chances are you have made a lot of progress in your practice already, but you don't notice it because progress is very slow. Yeah. I got some really good advice from a monk named Ajahn Prateep, who many of you probably know. He was living at Abhayagiri when I was newly ordained, and I was trying really hard to practice and kriyat. I was kriyat mak and dung mak, very tense. And I would tell Ajahn Prateep, I think it's not working. The practice doesn't work. I'm going to disrobe. And so Ajahn Prateep said, just wait till 5 pansa. And when you're 5 pansa, then if you look at when you were newly ordained, if it's not better, then you can disrobe. So I said, okay, so I will take that advice. And he said, every 5 years, just look at that. So at 5 pansa, I look back and, well, I am better. It went up and down a lot, but at 5 pansa, I was better than when I ordained. But 1, 2, 3, 4, I couldn't notice. I didn't know I was getting better. But if I look at 5, so for yourself, look 5 years ago. Are you better now than you were 5 years ago? So are you better now than you were 10 years ago? That's the way to look at practice. Are you better now than you were 25 years ago? Because in samsara, one lifetime is very short. So then I looked at 10 pansa, Well, I am a little bit better than 5 pansa. 15, I'm a little bit better than 10. 20, I'm a little bit better than 15. So we keep bailele. You just keep going. Yeah. And you don't have to worry. Yeah, you don't have to worry that it's going to be problematic. But we also don't know how we're going to die. Some of us might die in our bed of old age. Some of us might die in a car accident. Some of us might have a heart attack or a stroke. We don't know how. But if we have that, if we keep practicing, it doesn't really matter. We don't need to prepare for the exact moment of death, because at the time of death, the mind will go to where its habits are already. And if we're practicing on a regular basis, then the mind already. So one way we can know the mind is with the practice is sometimes something scary might happen to us, or we see a snake, or something bad is about to happen to us. What does our mind? I know for myself at a certain point, like if I had a bad dream, in my dream, I was like, Buddho, 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 in my dream. I woke up, what was that? So that if we do that, it means we're automatically taking refuge in Buddha, going there for safety. And that means our mind is with Buddha Dhamma Sangha. So if we want to know where our tipung is, then we look, where does our mind go in extreme sickness, extreme difficulty? Does it go to the Buddha? Or does it go to something else, to alcohol, to whatever other escape people have? So if it goes to Buddha, already good. My dong ben huang. Next question.
Namaskaran, พระอาจารย์ I have a question about my practice. While meditating, I see my mind that wandering around having questions like I am correct to do like this, or what to do next, where is the wisdom, something like this. And then I realized that this is feeling of not knowing. And then when I feel that this is the feeling of not knowing, so I try to stay with it, not knowing anything, but just to accept it. And I feel at that point there is no desire. And then when you stay with it for long, I feel that it's the feeling of the unknowingness that you stay with. It's widely open. And then you can accept all the things, and it feels like the unknowingness become one with the knowing. And I think it's egoless.
Sadhu.
Is this correct?
That's correct. Very good.
Mhm.
Sadhu.
Mm.
Sadhu. I remember when Ajahn Dan was at Abhayagiri, he gave a talk about that and how we need to be able to be okay with staying with the not knowing. Yeah, because that idea, that not knowing, but then there is knowing. There is knowing as well. You see it, so there is knowing as well. But not knowing in terms of, normally we want to know this, we want to know that. But if we learn how to be okay with not knowing, That's really extremely good. That's Anichang. That's very good, because we never know anyway. No matter how much we think, we don't know. So if we're okay with not knowing, that's very good. Yeah. All of us want to do our Google Calendar, and we know we're going to do this on this day. We know we're going to do this on this day, but actually we don't know. We don't know how it's going to happen. We sit down to meditate. We want to have good meditation. We want to get samadhi, but we don't know. We don't know how it's going to be. And we don't know exactly what we have to do, but we can be okay with not knowing. So that's very good. Keep doing that. It's like we want, like all the questions, like we want to know we're going to be okay at the time of death. Like, you know, whether we're going to go to heaven or whether we're up or down, but then we don't know. So we have to be okay with not knowing. It's very good. This question.
I have one, Ajahn. You probably come into contact with the dying more often than we do. Can you tell us some good experiences you've had with practitioners who died in front of you or died close to meeting you?
Yeah, the most recent one was Metika, who some of you may have met. She went to the cave, you might remember, in 2006 with the Calm group from Abhayagiri, the community of Abhayagiri lay ministry. So the most recent one was, she was a very strong practitioner, and she was overweight and had a type of cancer which made her very tired all the time. And she passed away last year, September 25th, 2022, at the age of 82. And she had this Dhamma center called 3 Jewels. And she was sick for a long time. Her kidneys were failing. So for the last 10 years, she had to have dialysis like 2 or 3 times a week. And she would be very tired. And she had this chair she would sit in. And before COVID, we would go once a month and give a teaching, and we would spend the night at her house. And then she would make breakfast for the monks, and somebody would drive us back to the monastery. And I always looked forward to going there. And she would only talk about Dhamma. She was a student of Ruth Denison. How many know who Ruth Denison is? She's one of the main female Dhamma teachers who took the Dhamma to America. And she's a contemporary of Goenka. So Metika was a student of Ruth Denison. And Ajahn Amaro had given her the name Metika because she had so much anger. So he gave her the name Metika, one who has metta. But over the years, as she practiced, she was had a very long life. She was a school teacher in Fort Bragg on the coast near Abhayagiri. She was a school teacher. She helped students with like autism and disabilities. She was very good with children. And then she got interested in Dhamma, and she started this Dhamma center in 1998. So it's 24 years ago. And Longpo Pasano and Ajahn Amaro personally helped build the Dhamma hall at her place. It was built out of straw bale construction. And then even ever since that time, she had invited all the monks who visited Abhayagiri would go there. Longpo Liam, Lumpur Sumedo, almost everybody's met Metika. And I always liked her. I knew her since the beginning, since I was in Anagarika. Even though we had like arguments sometimes in the kitchen because I was Kriyat, as I already said. And she was also like easy to get angry. So, but then over time we developed quite a good relationship. And then I would always look forward to going there because she and especially more recently, so she was getting much more tired even before COVID happened. And then she would sit in this chair and she could just sit there all day. Sometimes she would pick up a book. She had all of her books next to her. Sometimes she would get up and use her walker to make herself some food. And she did have somebody in the last 4 or 5 years, she would sit in this chair and not really go anywhere. And she was, but then when we would go there, she'd be very normal with us and just talk about Dhamma. We would have Dhamma discussions. She would offer Nampana to us and we would discuss Dhamma. And I always thought that was very impressive to me that she could just sit there and be alone for most of the day. And then we would show up and she would be completely happy to see us, completely normal. And then when we left, she was also good. She was also fine. She was fine being by herself. Didn't make any difference to her. But if there was people there, she'd be very fun to be around, very fun to talk to. But if people left, then she was okay. Also, she knew how to be by herself. She was almost like a monk. Like she would just sit in this chair all day, and she would sit in the chair all night because she had a problem where she couldn't lie down because of her breathing. So she would also sit in the chair all night. So she would sit in this one chair all day and all night and practicing sati, practicing mindfulness, especially at the end when she couldn't move around so much. So over the past few years, she started falling and she broke her leg. She had to be in the hospital for a long time. Then that healed and she went back home. This is all during the COVID era. And then she fell and broke her leg again and went back to a hospital for a long time. And then eventually it was not healing so well. And she went to a care center in Ukiah, which was great because she was nearby. So the monks could visit her at this care center. And so we started visiting her from time to time. And she was getting her dialysis there. And then one day when she was getting the dialysis, she said, okay, that's enough. I don't want the dialysis anymore. I think I don't want to live like this. It's time to go. So without dialysis, you can only live 3 or 4 weeks at the most. So she went off dialysis and then we started visiting her on a daily basis and doing chanting for her, telling stories. Her memory was getting worse. So she would sometimes she would forget who had come to see her or whatever. But you could see she still had good sati, good mindfulness, and she was just laying in the hospital bed. And the impressive part about this, she never asked for any books. She never watched TV. She doesn't have a phone. She just laid in that hospital bed and she was just completely okay. Like she would fall asleep. She would wake up. If you were there, she would talk to you. If not, she wouldn't. And so a lot of us were very impressed by this. Like, wow, she has really good practice. And she seemed very happy also. Once she decided she was dying, she seemed very happy. And so I went to see her with Ajahn Kovilo one day. And Ajahn Kovilo, sometimes he asks questions that the rest of us don't want to ask. So, and he asked Metika, how's your meditation? And so at this point, it was getting very close to the end, and she had been off of dialysis for 3 weeks and was experiencing a lot of nausea all of a sudden, like nothing coming out, but like really painful looking, like dry heaving. So she was experiencing nausea. So Ajahn Kovilo said, how's the meditation? And she said, what did she say? It's a very good teaching. She said, it's the same as the nausea. So her meditation was whatever she was experiencing at that moment. It wasn't like she was going somewhere else or kind of getting away from it. She was just with the experience. And I thought that was a very good answer. So then it looked like it was getting closer to her passing away. And we were going every day. I would go maybe once every 3 days. Luang Por would go once every 3 days or so. And then it happened that it was this Buddhist bicycle pilgrimage that they wanted to start doing again after COVID. They wanted to invite us in person. So I went, and I was part of this. I stayed at this campground. It was the night of September 24th. I stayed at this campground. I gave a Dhamma talk for these Buddhist bicycle pilgrims, and then they rode their bikes to Abhayagiri. And their plan was to get to Abhayagiri on the 25th. And we thought, well, nobody's going to be able to visit Metika today. And then I think Ajahn Kasapo ended up going anyway on that day. We thought it was good to have somebody go. But I was very, very busy. And then the Buddhist bicycle pilgrims got to Abhayagiri about 4 p.m. on September 25th. And we did a closing ceremony for them and gave a Dhamma talk, gave a blessing, chanted some paritas. Then it just so happened it was also Mocha that day. So we canceled evening puja. Everybody went up for Mocha. And we had the Mocha. And then I was completely exhausted. And Luang Por was like, okay, everybody, let's go take a rest. Oh, yes. So tired. It was about 9 p.m. And then right after Luang Por said that, I got this phone call. I was keeping the phone on because I knew things were happening with Metika. And I got this phone call, and it was Dennis who was looking after Metika. And he said, I think she's dying right now. You better come. I said, Dennis, I'm so tired right now. Don't you think she's going to live till the morning? And then he said, well, do you want to hear her breathing? And he held the phone up to her, and it was like this death breathing, like that happens right before you die. I said, okay. So I got a few of the monks, and Luang Por has these hip problems. So he soaks in a hot bath after Patimokkha. And I said, Luang Por, we're going to go see Metika. I think she's actively dying right now. And Luang Por was in his bath already. So he said, okay, after my bath, I'll let me know. And if it happens, I'll come down also. And so I went with Ajahn Chunda, Ajahn Kasapo, a few others. And we drove, and it was 9:30 p.m. And we got to the center. And then we got in, and Dennis came out and said, she just now breathed her last breath. So we ran in, and her body, and we got there like 1 minute after she breathed her last breath. And then we were there. And for me, it was very profound, a very good experience, because I felt like even though she had breathed her last breath, she was still alive. There was still the subtle breathing that was happening, and her body was still warm. And she still looked alive. And then we sat there for an hour quietly around her body, and you could feel and see her body cooling off. And after about an hour, Luang Por got there, and Debbie and the others, and we did the funeral chanting. And for myself, I felt a very strong presence in the room. And it was just an end of it was very amazing to see a Dhamma practitioner who had a very good practice die and pass away, and to be there for it, to be there at the moment that she died. And so we stayed and did the funeral chanting, and then sat for another hour. And then we did some praparit. We did the parita chanting. There was about 10 of us there. And then we had to leave for about 20 minutes while the people who come to take the body, they washed her and they put normal clothes on her and then laid her out. And I thought she looked very beautiful. It was very interesting. She was very, very peaceful and looked younger, actually. So we went back in and did more sitting and more chanting. And then it was about 1 a.m. And then I was really tired. So then we went back to take a rest, and that was that. But that was a very good experience, very, very profound. That was the most recent experience like that. Time for one more short question, maybe. But I thought that for me, what stuck with me was when she said the meditation was the same as the nausea. She wasn't trying to get away. She was totally with her body. She had kayagata sati. She was completely with what was happening and was completely okay with it, even though it was painful. Yeah. Yeah, so that's the next part is she always, well, one of them, yeah. So on the coast, she always had it in her will that it would become a branch monastery of Abhayagiri after she passed away. So that is happening now, and there will be monks there regularly, and there's a Pindabat from that place. It's a very nice place. Yeah. So we have a new branch monastery currently. It's in Fort Bragg. It's on the coast. Yeah. Yeah, so far it's Ajahn Kasapo and Ajahn Titapanyo, and there's a layman who's going to be living there. And there's already people in the town who are really excited and looking forward to. There's a man, interestingly, there's a man who is named John Stewart, who is there all the time and helping with carpet. He's a handyman, and he's really so a very strong practitioner, and he's helping out. It already is. Yeah. Yeah, it already is. So we own it now. Yeah. Yeah. We kept the same name, Three Jewels. Yeah. Yeah. It was always called Three Jewels, and there's already a sign there that says Three Jewels and has 3 Bodhi leaves. So similar to Tisarana, but we'll use the English to not get it mixed up with Tisarana, which also means 3 jewels. Then there's the other branch monastery, which came about on Tudong with Ajahn Sek in 2019, when Ajahn Sek and myself and Tantisro were on Tudong. This other place got offered, and that's the 15 acres of redwoods, 3 hours north of Abhayagiri. And that doesn't have a name yet. We're just calling it Humboldt Vihara. So that's also happening. Just so happened it came at the same time, 2 new branch monasteries. But the owner of that place is still alive, and she's 86, very good health and very active. And she wants the monks there because she wants us to learn about how to look after it. But she's already left it to us in her will. So, but she wants us to live there like while she's still alive and be there regularly. They're already talking about building a kuti, and so it's expanding a bit as the Sangha starts to grow. Okay, now we're past 5. No more questions.